Hey everyone, thanks for coming back. Thanks for your time. Another relatively slow news week for Artemis was disrupted as the news again comes from the other familiar NASA watchdog, this time the agency's Office of Inspector General, which is an independent oversight organization. OIG audits agency operations and reports to stakeholders from the executive and legislative branches to the taxpayers. A couple of days ago, on Thursday, they issued a report on their recent audit of the SLS program's development of their first upgrade, the Block 1B configuration. SLS Block 1B upgrades the second stage of the vehicle from the commercial off-the-shelf interim cryogenic propulsion stage to the EUS, the exploration upper stage, which is developed in-house and optimized for SLS. These oversight reports from GAO and OIG are becoming more and more essential as the Artemis programs become more proprietary and they communicate in public and to the public less and less. The watchdog organizations may be one of the few groups still authorized to look at internal performance and report findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Let's go through first impressions and takeaways from the report. The NASA Office of Inspector General, or OIG, released Report IG 24015 on August 8th. The report found problems with the quality management system that SLS Stage's prime contractor Boeing uses at the Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans, saying that the system does not meet required standards. OIG also found quality control issues and reported that officials with NASA and DCMA oversight of the contractor attributed those issues to a workforce for Boeing having insufficient aerospace production experience. DCMA stands for the Defense Contract Management Agency. A second major conclusion of the report was that SLS Block 1B development continues to be delayed, and those delays will increase the final cost of development. And then the third conclusion was a lack of visibility into the increasing costs and associated delays due to a lack of cost and schedule baselines that weren't set until last December, much later in the life cycle of the project than usual. OIG recommended improvements to Boeing's training program and fixing their cost and schedule management system, which OIG reports is an issue for multiple government agencies. They also recommended a detailed cost overrun analysis of EUS development under that specific contract, and also recommended financial penalties for the quality control problems. NASA concurred with 3 of the 4 recommendations, saying that they interpreted the one regarding financial penalties to be broadly outside the terms of the contract. Representing the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate, Associate Administrator Catherine Kerner also noted this in the response regarding the quality control issues that, quote, "While it is recognized that the contractor has encountered quality issues, it is important to avoid making assumptions that this will result in substandard parts being used in the spacecraft. NASA maintains specific processes to ensure quality issues are not flowed to the flight hardware," unquote. She also highlighted the supply chain issues in general, writing, quote, "These disruptions have had a profound impact on the aerospace industry, leading to production delays, increased costs, and challenges in meeting customer demand. ESDMD's buying power is decreasing each year and escalating. These unforeseen challenges, including technical issues, are all contributing factors to cost and schedule impacts," unquote. Before going through the main points and conclusions, there were a couple of items that seemed out of date or incomplete, or both, when going through the report for the first time. The first was regarding an anomaly that was a watch item through almost all of 2023, which was the status of the liquid oxygen tank for Core Stage 3, which will eventually fly on the third SLS launch, Artemis III. Structural assembly of the tank became a bigger and bigger question as 2023 went on, and the problem turned out to be issues with welding the aft dome for the tank. The OIG report uses that anomaly to illustrate issues with quality control and the training and experience of the workforce at Michoud, but then it moves on, leaving a line or two dangling. The report includes a picture taken on April 26th of 2023 showing the aft dome, but the report doesn't specify which dome. It says, quote, "The company is currently evaluating the dome to determine whether and how it can safely be used going forward," unquote. But in parallel, Boeing went ahead and welded another liquid oxygen tank aft dome last year, so it's not clear to what extent OIG followed up after April of 2023. Both forward and aft domes are critical components of the core stage propellant tanks in general, and for core stage 3 specifically, but that out-of-spec dome isn't a part of core stage 3 anymore. By October last year, it had long been set aside. When I visited Michoud in October 2023 with NASASpaceflight.com, we were told that the out-of-spec dome was set aside and materials for another LOX tank aft dome were already nearly welded. A new Y-ring and new gore body, already welded, were in the core stage dome welding tool, and the end cap was already loaded in the tool to make the final large-scale weld. As I reported in videos published here in January and February, welding of the new dome was completed last December. The rest of the LOX tank was stuck in the tank weld tool, the vertical assembly center, for a year. But the final tank weld was completed just after New Year's, and the tank was removed from the VAC on February 1st. Subsequently, the tank is now moving towards thermal protection system applications after plug welds, proof testing, and non-destructive inspections. Having said that, the report provides the key point about the root cause of the problem, saying that the out-of-dimension dome was caused by, quote, inexperienced technicians and inadequate work order planning and supervision, unquote. And that doesn't take away from the main points about quality control, workforce inexperience, and workforce training that I'll come back to. The second item was the timeline for Block 1B. The report lists 5 areas of factors that contributed to the cost and schedule overruns. The second bullet item, changing mission dates, leaves out some of the narrative. EUS and Block 1B comes out of the post-formulation days of the SLS program, which was officially kicked off in September of 2011. Even though the more ambitious Constellation program had just been canceled, in part because of cost and schedule overruns, and government was already in a period of austerity, there were still some ambitions for immediate upgrades. After all, Congress had worded the law to include a mandate that SLS be designed to be able to eventually lift 130 tons to low Earth orbit. But there was no deadline for that, and more importantly, no money. SLS looked at 2 paths of evolution in that time frame. Path A would have included development of 4 upgrades, not just an upgraded upper stage, but 2 upper stages, which would have made SLS a 3-stage vehicle. Well, 3.5 stages, since a solid rocket booster upgrade has always been in the plans. Path A also would have added a 5th engine to the core stage. The realities of the government spending austerity led the program to choose the other evolution path, Path B. Instead of trying to wedge another engine into the core stage, developing 2 upper stages, and finishing development of the Constellation J2X engine, Path B is what we see at a high level today. It was based on just 2 development projects as opposed to 4. As an aside, that's why the current vehicle is not called Block 1A. The initial vehicle was just and is just Block 1. The Block 1A and Block 2 concepts that we see here included 2 sets of upper stage and booster upgrades. NASA was studying the EUS concept back in the 2013 timeframe, but Congress did not appropriate funds for it until the very end of 2015, as that period of austerity was waning. NASA did not assign EUS and Block 1B to the second SLS launch until after they got those New START appropriations. So 3 weeks after fiscal year 2016 appropriations were enacted, Exploration Mission 2, as it was called through most of the last decade, became the first Block 1B flight. EUS was nearing its critical design review in 2018 when Congress mandated and funded Mobile Launcher 2. At the time, SLS was the mandated launch vehicle for Europa Clipper, and NASA was mandated to launch Europa Clipper as soon as possible. Some of the dominoes that fell as a result of Mobile Launcher 2 were not only continued usage of the Block 1 vehicle with the interim cryogenic propulsion stage and Mobile Launcher 1, but also a cut in funding for EUS and a redesign to optimize payload performance for co-manifested TLI deliveries. As a part of that, I believe that a planetary design reference mission, such as for Europa Clipper on EUS, was deleted. The report cites some of this elsewhere in a footnote, but EUS wasn't just moved up to Exploration Mission 2 and then deferred to the fourth SLS launch. There was a stop work order and a redesign for the rest of 2018 and much of 2019. By that time, the Trump administration had proposed that EUS and Mobile Launcher 2 essentially be canceled, and NASA began making plans in 2019 and 2020 to at least preserve the option of canceling both those projects. The report included this graphic showing the projected delivery date of the EUS first flight article. Setting that period aside, when the project was mothballed, there's still a lot of movement of the delivery date to the right since the beginning of this decade, after defunding EUS, Block 1B, and Mobile Launcher were taken back off the table. As noted in the video a few months back about the OIG report that focused mostly on Orion issues during Artemis I, these reports are essential, but also irregular. Irregular audits leave a lot of ground and program history to cover only a couple of times a decade. It's unclear when OIG will return to audit this work again, but this is a critical period in the design, development, test, and evaluation of the project, and more frequent auditing might help with the transparency that the report recommends. Government auditing bodies like OIG are likely the only ones remaining with the access or insight into the private programs that are also allowed to report to the public in any detail. If we take a look at the active OIG projects in the space operations area, we see reports on Artemis IV, HLS, and Mobile Launcher 2 are in work. In the case of HLS and Starship, the last report on that was issued almost 3 years ago, and it may be a while longer before this upcoming one is completed and issued. Returning to the main points of the report, OIG found that, quote, Boeing's quality management system for core stage production at Michoud does not meet industry standards, unquote. And that, quote, Boeing's Michoud workforce lacks sufficient aerospace production experience, training, and instruction, unquote. It's unclear whether they mean officials for Boeing or NASA or both, but the report also says, quote, Michoud officials stated that it has been difficult to attract and retain a contractor workforce with aerospace manufacturing experience, in part due to Michoud's geographical location in New Orleans, Louisiana, and lower employee compensation relative to other aerospace competitors. The report also cites schedule uncertainty issues and problems with the system that is supposed to make cost and schedule estimates. The report only notes an April 2027 delivery date of the EUS flight article to NASA, but doesn't note intermediate milestones. It shows the EUS green run in 2025, but that date could be aspirational. The report attributes some of the issues to an Earned Value Management System, or EVMS, which OIG also says, quote, has been in a disapproved status by the U.S. Department of Defense since 2020, unquote. It notes that verifying improvements to the system aren't expected to be complete until late this year, adding, quote, until then, Boeing's EVMS cannot produce meaningful data that can be used to make informed decisions and produce credible forecasts. According to NASA contracting officials, Boeing cannot produce a realistic baseline delivery date for the EUS due to continuing deficiencies in its EVMS, unquote. An April 2027 delivery date of the flight article to NASA gives Boeing just 2.5 years to finish certifying weld tools, build the structures for the qualification article and flight article, outfit and deliver the structural test article to Marshall Space Flight Center, weld, outfit, test, and check out the EUS first flight article, and deliver it to Stennis Space Center, and then complete the EUS Green Run campaign. After that, the stage would be returned to Michoud for any post-test refurbishment work and to swap out the ground test sea-level RL-10 engines for the flight units, before riding on the Pegasus barge from MAF to the Kennedy Space Center. All that work would need to be completed in the next 2.5 years to meet that delivery date. There's more to take away from this report, and I'll continue to review it over the next few weeks and refer to it going forward. The report also provides some color to the long-term watch items for Artemis IV. One interesting note in the report is about the current critical paths for the mission. In footnote 33, it notes that the current primary critical path is Mobile Launcher 2, which was previously known. However, what's new is that the completion of the Gateway IHAB module is said to be the secondary critical path. The report is of course observing that EUS and Block 1B could move up the list. Regardless, these are all things for the Artemis IV watch item list. There's EGS and Mobile Launcher 2, there's the Gateway initial elements and the IHAB module, there's EUS and Block 1B that will enable launching IHAB with Orion, there's HLS and Starship development, and there's the base Orion and SLS elements that will mostly fly again on Artemis II and III in the meantime. And the current target date for Artemis IV is just about 4 years away now. This OIG report highlights the bumpy road for Artemis. It is taking all the programs longer than was forecasted. But it is also the case at the same time that they are progressing, and in the news and notes for the week, NASA Public Affairs at Kennedy Space Center posted pictures of one of the Integrated Systems Verification and Validation tests that was conducted on Thursday, April 8th, while we were poring over the OIG report. This one was called ISVV-1, and it ran through tests of the emergency egress system that is being installed at Pad 39B for use beginning with Artemis II. All 4 baskets have been set up on cables that run from the mobile launcher that is hard down on the Pad 39B pedestals to the pad egress or terminus area out near the pad perimeter. Mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, or MRAPs, will be positioned there in case the system needs to be used while the mobile launcher is at the pad. As the name implies, the system is there to provide an escape route for personnel high up on the ML's umbilical tower in case of an emergency. On launch day, only the flight crew and the closeout crew would be on the tower, and in that case, assistants would be unable to reach them quickly. The egress system provides a way to quickly evacuate the tower, and the MRAPs would provide an armor-protected vehicle to continue the evacuation to a safer location. Artemis II backup crew members, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jenny Gibbons and NASA astronaut Andre Douglas, participated in the test, which included running through launch day and emergency egress procedures. This emergency egress system will need to be torn down when the mobile launcher leaves Pad 39B, possibly as early as this month, and will need to be reinstalled when the ML returns to the pad next year with the Artemis II vehicle for testing and then launch. As we get closer to the symbolic end of the summer here in the US with Labor Day in a little more than 3 weeks, we could also see and learn about the next Artemis II milestones. One would be that return of Mobile Launcher 1 to the Vehicle Assembly Building to get ready for Artemis II stacking. This would be the first time the ML has been inside the VAB since early in 2023. It was returned to the VAB on December 8th and 9th of 2022, about 3 weeks after the Artemis I launch, for a little refurbishment, and then moved outside to the West Park site in early January 2023, where some of the physical modifications were made, before rolling straight from there out to Pad 39B in mid-August of last year. Another milestone would be maybe announcement of a decision on Orion base heat shield options after the internal investigation of the behavior during the Artemis I re-entry and the independent review of that. It's not clear whether a decision is in the critical path for Artemis II preparations or not at the moment. What is decided could easily be in the critical path if changes are necessary to the Artemis II heat shield. Final assembly and test of the Artemis II Orion spacecraft is the primary critical path right now, so we're waiting for any updates on the status of that work at KSC. And then sometime next month in September, likely closer to the equinox and the literal end of the summer, perhaps, we might hear about a decision on when to start stacking the Artemis II SLS. Thanks for watching as always. Click on the like button if you thought this video was informative. There's more to consider about these two recent government audits of elements that are critical to Artemis IV, the Gateway, and the Block 1B upgrade, and I'll have more to say about those while we wait for news on Artemis II developments this month.